I guess if there's one thing I've really enjoyed doing this project, it's having the ability to make my own monsters. It sometimes feels a little bit like I'm getting to tinker around and recreate all the iconic baddies from Star Trek, X Files, Doctor Who, the TV shows that I grew up with watching when I was a kid. And I guess the challenge for me is to take characters like Eugene Victor Toombs or the Hemivores and to borrow from them, but not too heavily, to try and still keep them original and interesting and fresh. One of the problems that I had when I created the Morgan was that essentially what it turns people into are zombies. Now, zombies are a trope that I've tried my best to steer clear of because it's the go-to, isn't it, for a World War II horror movie? And I mean, I've not been massively successful because you could argue that the Wendigo episode was kind of like zombies. Um, but I guess the fact is that this time round, what the Morgan creates, they drown people, they don't bite them, they're controlled by a central mind rather than being mindless and shambolic. And I guess that's why I was comfortable to run with them. I hope they're scary. I mean, I found them scary, so I hope that you guys did too. The episode started out like a few of the other ones have, with an email from Sean, who was coming with an idea for a short story centered around D-Day, and the one he proposed was a British glider being blown off course, and it lands in the graveyard of a French church. And when the crew gets out, they find that the occupants of the graveyard aren't quite as dead as they should be. And it's rare I say no to Sean. I'm sure he'll back me up on that. But I just felt that with Covenant, we'd already done French graveyards, and I was keen to try and move somewhere new. Um, but I wanted to keep the essence of the story. So the only other big British glider operation that sprang to mind was Market Garden. Now, Bridge Too Far is one of my favourite war movies, so it took no time at all for me to start obsessing about setting a story around Arnhem. Um, in this video, I'm not going to go into the background of the Morgan itself too much, and I'll tell you for why. There's going to be two short episodes following off from this one. One of them is going to be a character spin off, much like we did with Johnny Greywolf and Malediction. I'm not going to say who, though. And the other is going to be a history of the Morgan and the origins of some of its victims that are down there with it. What I will go into is the name. Morgan is the Celtic name for a water spirit. Most cultures, when you look at their history, have sirens and water entities somewhere in their past that are referenced. For the bulk of mainland European folklore, these creatures are known as nixies or knockers. Now, knocker is a bit of a funny term, so I didn't want to use that. And so I hunted around and decided to go with the Celtic version instead. For this story, I had this vision of this ancient water entity that lives in a massive dike and traps anybody who comes nearby, uses them like puppets to trap others, and then progressed in my head into an image of a British glider landing in the middle of the dike with the crew trapped and trying to fight for survival. And straight away, I immediately remembered the story of the British Jeep Squadron from Arnhem, and just locked into my head, I had this vision of a Jeep bursting out the back of the glider, guns blazing, with the dead clinging to it. Now, sometimes I do worry I've gone a little bit too Hollywood or too cliche with my thoughts, but at the same time, I do want memorable set pieces for each episode, and I thought this was just the right side of cheesy to run with. And then, as I'm sure most writers do from time to time, I hit an immediate brick wall in that it turns out you don't load a horse or glider from the back, you load it from the side. Or potentially, you detach the cockpit and put it in from the front. So, with that revelation, we were kind of back in business. And that's where Nolan's sacrificial scene comes from, a necessity to get the front end of the glider off to have the Jeep go blasting out of it. I've been itching to include a Midlander in a story ever since I started doing this. I hope that Jim Nolan doesn't come across too much as just a two-dimensional figure. The reality is, he reflects a great deal of the personality of various Black country folk who I've worked with. Um, I worked for 15 years in Dudley and Brierley Hill and the surrounding area. And my observations on people from the Black country is that they're loud sometimes, they're brash, they can be downright intimidating and confrontational. But when it comes down to it, and you can get past the swearing and the ridiculously bad humour, Yam Yams are very resilient and they're very good at doing things that other people can't get done. I guess, in a way, I suppose he's my British version of Johnny Grey Wolf. Um, this sort of supporting character who plays quite a key role, but just from a very different place on the other side of the world, but roughly the same time. Um, in researching the British Airborne Reconnaissance Squadron, their story is kind of as tragic and symptomatic of everything that was wrong with Market Garden. It seems over time this myth's built up that they arrived too late at the battle, and if they'd gone speeding ahead and captured the bridges, it would all have been a great success. Reality is, yes, they had heavy machine guns and light anti-tank weapons on board, but they were soft-skinned vehicles going up against SS Panzer units. It is true they did take a bit longer to unload than expected on the ground, but 25 out of the 34 Jeep and crews that were sent did get into battle, and unsurprisingly, they sustained heavy losses. 29 men killed, 75 managed to escape the German encirclement, and the rest were all captured, along with the main British force. Finally, as I did with Animus, I just want to recommend a book, which I'll put the link into below if you are interested in the Battle of Arnhem. That book is called It Never Snows in September. It's written by Robert Kershaw, and it shows the Market Garden campaign from the German point of view. There's a lot of detail to it, and it highlights some of the more ridiculous aspects of the supervision of both sides in the battle, and some of the heroism and the tragedy of people on the front lines who were involved. Right, thank you as always for watching. I'm not going to hang around today because, as I've already said, I've got 2 short story spin offs from Morgan to do now, and frankly, this stuff won't produce itself. So, goodbye.